Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 4, the Hams Guya prayers offered to the Lord by Prajapati Daksha. Summary. After Maharaj Parikshit appealed to Sukdev Goswami to describe in further detail the creation of the living entities within this universe, Sukdev Goswami informed him that when the Prachetas, the 10 sons of Prachina Bari, entered the sea to execute austerities, the planet Earth was neglected because of the absence of a king. Naturally, many weeds and unnecessary trees grew, and no food grains were produced. Indeed, all the land became like a forest. When the 10 Prachetas came out of the sea and saw the entire world full of trees, they were very angry with the trees and decided to destroy them all to rectify the situation. Thus, the Prachetas created wind and fire to burn the trees to ashes. Som, however, the king of the moon and the king of all vegetation, forbade the Prachetas to destroy the trees, since the trees are the source of fruit and flowers for all living beings. Just to satisfy the Prachetas, Som gave them a beautiful girl born of Pramlocha Apsara. By the semen of all the Prachetas, Daksha was born of that girl. In the beginning, Daksha created all the demigods, demons, and human beings. But when he found the population not increasing properly, he took sannyas and went to Vindhya mountain, where he underwent severe austerities and offered Lord Vishnu a particular prayer known as Hams Bhuya, by which Lord Vishnu became very pleased with him. The contents of the prayer were as follows. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Super Soul, Lord Hari, is the controller of both the living entities and material nature. He is self-sufficient and self-effulgent. As the subject matter of perception is not the cause of our perceiving senses, so the living entity, although within this body, does not cause his eternal friend, the Super Soul, who is the cause of creation of all the senses. Because of the living entity's ignorance, his senses are engaged with material objects. Since the living entity is alive, he can understand the creation of this material world to some extent. But he cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is beyond the conception of body, mind, and intelligence. Nevertheless, great sages who are always in meditation can see the personal form of the Lord within their hearts. Since an ordinary living being is materially contaminated, his words and intelligence are also material. Therefore, he cannot ascertain the Supreme Personality of Godhead by manipulating his material senses. The conception of God derived through the material senses is inaccurate because the Supreme Lord is beyond the material senses. But when one engages his senses in devotional service, the eternal Supreme Personality of Godhead is revealed on the platform of the soul. When that Supreme Godhead becomes the aim of one's life, one is said to have attained spiritual knowledge. The Supreme Brahman is the cause of all causes because he originally existed before the creation. He is the original cause of everything, both material and spiritual, and his existence is independent. However, the Lord has a potency called avidya, the illusionary energy, which induces the false arguer to think himself perfect and which induces the illusionary energy to bewilder the conditioned soul. The Supreme Brahman, the Super Soul, is very affectionate to his devotees. To bestow mercy upon them, he discloses his form, name, attributes, and qualities to be worshipped within this material world. Unfortunately, however, those who are materially absorbed worship various demigods. As the air passes over a lotus flower and carries the scent of the flower within it, or as the air sometimes carries dust and therefore assumes colors, the Supreme Personality Godhead appears as various demigods according to the desires of his various foolish worshippers. But actually, he is the Supreme Truth, Lord Vishnu. To fulfill the desires of his devotees, he appears in various incarnations, and therefore there is no need to worship the demigods. Being very satisfied by the prayers of Daksha, Lord Vishnu appeared before Daksha with 8 arms. The Lord was dressed in yellow garments and had a blackish complexion. Understanding that Daksha was very eager to follow the path of enjoyment, the Lord awarded him the potency to enjoy the illusionary energy. The Lord offered him the daughter of Pranchjana named Ashikni, who was suitable for Maharaj Daksha to enjoy in sex. Indeed, Daksha received his name because he was very expert in sex life. After awarding this benediction, Lord Vishnu disappeared. Text 1 2. Sri Raj translation. The blessed king said to Sukdev Goswami, my dear Lord, the demigods, demons, human beings, nagas, beasts, and birds were created during the reign of Swayambhu Manu. You have spoken about this creation briefly in the third canto. Now I wish to know about it elaborately. I also wish to know about the potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead by which He brought about the secondary creation. Text 3. Sud Goswami said, O great sages assembled at Naimisharanya, after the great yogi Sukdev Goswami heard King Parikshit's inquiry, he praised it and thus replied. Text 4. Sukdev Goswami said, when the 10 sons of Prachina Bari emerged from the waters in which they were performing austerities, they saw that the entire surface of the world was covered by trees. Purport. When King Prachina Bari was performing Vedic rituals in which the killing of animals was recommended, Narad Muni, out of compassion, advised him to stop. Prachina Bari understood Narada properly and then left the kingdom to perform austerities in the forest. His 10 sons, however, were performing austerity within the water, and therefore there was no king to see the management of the world. When the 10 sons, the Prachetas, came out of the water, they saw that the earth was overrun with trees. When the government neglects agriculture, which is necessary for the production of food, the land becomes covered with unnecessary trees. Of course, many trees are useful because they produce fruits and flowers, but many other trees are unnecessary. They could be used as fuel and the land cleared and used for agriculture. When the government is negligent, less grain is produced. As said in Bhagavad Gita 18.44, Krishigo Rakshya Vanigyam Vaishya Karma Swabhavajam. The proper engagements for Vaishya according to their nature are to farm and to protect cows. The duty of the government and the Kshatriya is to see that the members of the third class, the Vaishyas, who are neither Brahmanas nor Kshatriya, are thus properly engaged. Kshatriyas are meant to protect human beings, whereas Vaishyas are meant to protect useful animals, especially cows. Text 5. Because of having undergone long austerities in the water, the Prachetas were very angry at the trees. Desiring to burn them to ashes, they generated wind and fire from their mouths. Purport. Here the word Tapodiptiman Manavaya indicates that persons who have undergone severe austerities, tapasya, are endowed with great mystic power, as evinced by the Prachetas who created fire and wind from their mouths. Although devotees undergo severe tapasya, however, they are Vinaman, Viman, Vimanyavaha, Sadhvaha, which means they are never angry. They are always decorated with good qualities. Bhagavatam 3:25-21 states, Titiksva Karunika Suhridam Sarvadehinam Ajata Sattva Shanta Sadhva Sadhu Bhushana. A sadhu or devotee is never angry. Actually, the real feature of devotee who undergo tapasya, austerity, is forgiveness. Although a Vaishnava has sufficient power in tapasya, he does not become angry when put into difficulty. If one undergoes tapasya but does not become a Vaishnava, however, one does not develop good qualities. For example, Hiranyakashipu and Ravana also performed great austerities, but they did so to demonstrate their demoniac tendencies. Vaishnavas must meet many opponents while preaching the glories of the Lord. But Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recommends that they not become angry while preaching. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given this formula. Tinadapi sunichena tharorapi saheshtuna amanina mandena kirtaniya sadahari. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw on the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respects to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. Those engaged in preaching the glories of the Lord should be humbler than grass and more tolerant than a tree. Then they can preach the glories of the Lord without difficulty. Text 6. My dear King Parikshit, when Soma, the king of the trees and predominating deity of the moon, saw the fire and when burning all the trees to ashes, he felt great sympathy because he is the maintainer of all herbs and trees. To appease the anger of the Prachetas, Som spoke as follows. Purport. It is understood from this verse that the predominant deity of the moon is the maintainer of all the trees and plants throughout the universe. It is due to the moonshine that trees and plants grow very luxuriantly. Therefore, how can we accept the so called scientists whose moon expeditions have informed us that there are no trees or vegetation on the moon? Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, Somo Vrikshadhadita Sa Eva Vrikshanam Raja. Som, the predominating deity of the moon, is the king of all vegetation. How can we believe that the maintainer of vegetation has no vegetation on his own planet? Text 7. O greatly fortunate ones, you should not kill these poor trees by burning them to ashes. Your duty is to wish the citizens, prajas, all prosperity and to act as their protectors. Purport. It is indicated herein that the government or king has the duty of protecting not only the human beings but all other living entities including animals, trees and plants. No living entity should be killed unnecessarily. Text 8. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Hari, is the master of all living entities, including all the Prajapatis, such as Lord Brahma. Because he is the all pervading and indestructible master, he has created all these trees and vegetables as eatables for other living entities. Purport. Soma, the predominant deity of the moon, reminded the Prachetas that this vegetation has been created by the Lord of Lords to provide food for everyone. If the Prachetas tried to kill them off, their own subjects would also suffer, for trees are also required for food. Text 9. By nature's arrangement, fruits and flowers are considered the food of insects and birds. Grass and other legless living entities are meant to be the food of four-legged animals like cows and buffalo. Animals that cannot use their front legs as hands are meant to be the food of animals like tigers, which have claws, and four-legged animals like deer and goats, as well as food grains, are meant to be the food of human beings. Purport. By nature's law or the arrangement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the one king of living entity is eatable. One kind of living entity is eatable by other living entities. As mentioned herein, Dvipadam Cha Chatushpada, the four-legged animals, Chatushpada, as well as food grains are eatables for human beings, Dvipadam. These four-legged animals are those such as deer and goats, not cows, which are meant to be protected. Generally, the men of the higher classes of society, the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, do not eat meat. Sometimes Kshatriyas go to the forest to kill animals like deer because they have to learn the art of killing. And sometimes they eat the animals also. Shudras too eat animals such as goats. Cows, however, are never meant to be killed or eaten by human beings. In every Shastra, cow killing is vehemently condemned. Indeed, one who kills a cow must suffer for as many years as there are hairs on the body of a cow. Manu Samhita says, Pravritti Esha Bhutanam Nivitesh tu Mahaphala. We have many tendencies in this material world, but in human life, one is meant to learn how to curb these tendencies. Those who desire to eat meat may satisfy the demands of their tongues by eating lower animals, but they should never kill cows, who are actually accepted as mothers of human society because they supply milk. The Shastra especially recommends Krishi Gorakshaya. The Vaishya section of humanity should arrange for the food of the entire society through agricultural activities and should give full protection to the cows, which are the most useful animals because they supply milk to human society. Text 10. O pure-hearted ones, your father Prachinabari and the Supreme Personality of Godhead have ordered you to generate population. Therefore, how can you burn to ashes these trees and herbs which are needed for the maintenance of your subjects and descendants? Text 11. The path of goodness traversed by your father, grandfather, and great grandfathers is that of maintaining the subjects, prajas, including the men, animals, and trees. That is the path you should follow. Unnecessary anger is contrary to your duty. Therefore, I request you to control your anger. Purport. Here the words Pitra Pitamahi Mati Justam Va Pratitamahe depict an honest royal family consisting of the kings and their fathers, their grandfathers, and their great grandfathers. Such a royal family has a prestigious position because it maintains the citizens of Prajas. The word Praja refers to one who has taken birth within the jurisdiction of the government. The exalted royal families were conscious that all living beings, whether human, animal, or lower than animal, should be given protection. The modern democratic system cannot be exalted in this way because the leaders elected strive only for power and have no sense of responsibility. In a monarchy, a king with a prestigious position follows the great deeds of his forefathers. Thus, Som, the king of moon, here reminds the Pachatas about the glories of their father, grandfather, and great grandfathers. Text 12. As the father and mother are the friends and maintainers of their children, as the eyelid is the protector of the eye, as the husband is the maintainer and protector of a woman, as the householder is the maintainer and protector of beggars, as the learned is the friend of the ignorant, so the king is the protector and giver of life to all his subjects. The trees are also subjects of the king, therefore they should be given protection. Purport. By the supreme will of the personality of Godhead, there are various protectors and maintainers for helpless living entities. The trees are also considered prajas, subjects of the king, and therefore the duty of the monarch is to protect even the trees, not to speak of others. The king is duty bound to protect the living entities in his kingdom. Thus, although the parents are directly responsible for the protection and maintenance of their children, the duty of the king is to see that all parents do their duty properly. Similarly, the king is also responsible for overseeing the other protectors mentioned in this verse. It may also be noted that the beggars who should be maintained by the householders are not professional beggars, but sannyasis and brahmanas, to whom the householders should supply food and clothing. Text 13. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is situated as the Super Soul within the core of the hearts of all living entities, whether moving or non-moving, including men, birds, animals, trees, and indeed all living entities. Therefore, you should consider everybody as a residence. Therefore, you should consider everybody a residence or temple of the Lord. By such vision, you will satisfy the Lord. You should not angrily kill these living entities in the forms of trees. Purport. As stated in Bhagavad Gita and confirmed by all Vedic scriptures, Ishvara Sarva Bhutanam Hridadesha Arjuna Tishtati. The Supreme Soul is situated within everyone's heart. Therefore, since everyone's body is a residence of the Supreme Lord, one should not destroy the body because of unnecessary envy. That will dissatisfy the Super Soul. Soma told the Prachetas that because they had tried to satisfy the Super Soul, now they should not displease him. Text 14. One who inquires into self-realization and thus subdues his powerful anger, which awakens suddenly in the body as if falling from the sky, transcends the influence of modes of material nature. Purport. When one becomes angry, he forgets himself and his situation. But if one is able to consider his situation by knowledge, one transcends the influence of modes of material nature. One is always a servant of lusty desires, anger, greed, illusion, envy, and so forth. But if one obtains sufficient strength in spiritual advancement, one can control them. One who obtains such control will always be transcendently situated, untouched by the modes of material nature. This is only possible when one fully engages in the service of the Lord. As the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 14.26, Mamachayo bicharena bhakti yogena sevate savgunana samtitya chan brahma bhujayate kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall in any circumstance, at once transcends the mode of material nature and thus comes to the spiritual platform. By engaging one in devotional service, the Krishna consciousness movement keeps one always transcendental to anger, greed, lust, envy, and so forth. One must perform devotional service because otherwise one will become victimized by modes of material nature. Text 15. There is no need to burn these poor trees any longer. Let whatever trees still remain be happy. Indeed, you should also be happy. Now here is a beautiful and well qualified girl named Marisha, uh, who was raised by the trees as their daughter. You may accept this beautiful girl as your wife. Text 16. Shukdev Goswami continued, My dear king, after thus pacifying the Prachetas, Soma, the king of the moon, gave them the beautiful girl born of Pramlocha Apsara. The Prachetas all received Pramlocha's daughter, who had high, very beautiful hips, and married her according to the religious system. Text 17. In the womb of that girl, the Prachetas all begot a son named Daksha, who filled the three worlds with living entities. Purport. Daksh was first born during the reign of Swayambhu Manu, but because of offending Lord Shiva, he was punished by having the head of a goat substituted for his own head. Thus insulted, he had to give up that body, and in the sixth Manvantara, called the Chakshusha Manvantara, he was born of the womb of Marisha as Daksha. In this connection, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur quotes this verse, Chakshushe तव अंतरे प्राप्ते प्राक सर्गे काल विद्रुतते यह सर्जा प्रजा इष्टा स दक्षो दैव चोदितः. His previous body had been destroyed, but he, the same Daksha, inspired by the supreme will, created by all desired living entities in the Chakshusha Manvantara. Bhagavatam 4.30.49. Thus Daksha regained his previous opulence and again begot thousands and millions of children to fill the three worlds. Text 18. Shukdev Goswami continued, Please hear from me with great attention how Prajapati Daksha, who was very affectionate to his daughters, created different types of living entities through his semen and through his mind. Purport. The word Dhruhitrer Vatsalaha indicate that all the Prajapati were born from Daksha's daughters. Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that apparently Daksha had no son. Text 19. With his mind, Prajapati Daksha first created all kinds of demigods, demons, human beings, birds, beasts, aquatics, and so on. Text 20. But when Prajapati Daksha saw that he was not properly generating all kinds of living entities, he approached a mountain near the Vindhya mountain range, and there he executed very difficult austerities. Text 21. Near that mountain was a very holy place named Agham Rasna. Agham Rasna. There Prajapati Daksha executed ritualistic ceremonies and satisfied the Supreme Personality of Godhead Hari by engaging in great austerities to please him. Text 22. My dear king, I shall fully explain to you the Hams Guhya prayers which were offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead by Daksha, and I shall explain how the Lord was pleased with him for those prayers. Purport. It is to be understood that the Hams Guhya prayers were not composed by Daksha but were existing in Vedic literature. Text 23. Prajapati Daksha said, The Supreme Personality of Godhead is transcendental to the illusionary energy and the physical categories it produces. He possesses the potency for unfailing knowledge and supreme willpower, and he is the controller of the living entities and the illusionary energy. The conditioned souls who have accepted this material manifestation as everything cannot see him, for he is above the evidence of experimental knowledge. self evident, and self sufficient. He is not caused by any superior cause. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Purport. The transcendental position of the Supreme Personality Godhead is explained herewith. He is not perceivable by conditioned souls who are accustomed to material vision and cannot understand that the Supreme Personality Godhead exists in his abode, which is beyond that vision. Even if a materialistic person could count all the atoms in the universe, he would still be unable to understand the Supreme Personality Godhead, as confirmed in Brahma Samhita 5.34. पंथास्तु कोटि शतवत्सरा संप्रज्ञमयो वायुरथापि मनसो मुनिपुङ्गवानां सोऽपि यस्त प्रदप सिमनीय अविंच तत्त्वे गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तहं भजामि. The conditioned soul may try to understand the Supreme Personality Godhead for many billions of years through their mental speculative processes, traveling at the speed of mind or the wind, but still the absolute truth will remain inconceivable to them because a materialistic person cannot measure the length and breadth of the Supreme Personality of Godhead's unlimited existence. If the absolute truth is beyond measurement, one may ask, how can one realize him? The answer is given here by the word Swayam Bhuve. One may understand him or not, but nevertheless he is existing in his own spiritual potency. Text 24. As the sense objects, form, taste, touch, smell, and sound, cannot understand how the senses perceive them, so the conditioned soul, although residing in his body along with the super soul, cannot understand how the supreme spiritual person, the master of the material creation, directs his senses. Let me offer my respectful obeisance unto that supreme person who is the supreme controller. Purport. The individual soul and the super soul live together within the body. This is confirmed in the Upanishads by the analogy that two friendly birds live in one tree. One bird eating the fruit of the tree and the other simply witnessing and directing. Although the individual living being who is compared to the bird that is eating is sitting with his friend the super soul, the individual living being cannot see him. Actually, the super soul is directing the working of his senses in enjoyment of sense object. But as these sense objects cannot see the senses, the conditioned soul cannot see the directing soul. The conditioned soul has desires, and the supreme soul fulfills them. But the conditioned soul is unable to see the supreme soul. Thus, Prajapati Daksha offers his obeisances to the supreme soul, the super soul, even though unable to see him. Another example given is that although ordinary citizens work under the direction of the government, they cannot understand how they are being governed or what the government is. In this regard, Madhvacharya quotes the following verse from the Skand Puran. यथा रागिना प्रियतम तुम धृत्या वेदेन चात्मना तथा जीवो नायत साख्यम वेत्ति तस्मै नमोस्तुते. As the various servants in the different departments of big establishments cannot see the supreme managing director under whom they are working, the conditioned souls cannot see the supreme friend sitting within their bodies. Let us therefore offer our respectful obeisances unto the Supreme, who is invisible to our material eyes. Text 25. Because they are only matter, the body, the life airs, and the internal senses, the five gross elements, and the subtle sense objects, form, taste, smell, sound, and touch, cannot know their own nature, the nature of the other senses, or the nature of their controllers. But the living being, because of his spiritual nature, can know his body, the life airs, the senses, the elements, and the sense objects, and he can also know the three qualities that form their roots. Nevertheless, although the living being is completely aware of them, he is unable to see the Supreme Being, who is omniscient and unlimited. I therefore offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Purport. Many scientists can make an analytical study of the physical elements, the body, the senses, and the sense objects, and even the air that controls the vital force, but still they cannot understand. Above all these is the real spirit soul, In other words, the living entity, because of his being a spirit soul, can understand all the material objects, or when self realized, he can understand the Paramatma, upon whom yogis meditate. Nevertheless, the living being, even if advanced, cannot understand the Supreme Being, the personality of Godhead, for he is Ananta, unlimited in all six opulences. Text 26. When one's consciousness is completely purified of the contamination of material existence, gross and subtle, without being agitated as in the working and dreaming states, and when the mind is not dissolved as in susupti, deep sleep, one comes to the platform of trance. Then one's material vision and the memories of the mind, which manifests names and forms, are vanquished. Only in such a trance is the Supreme Personality of Godhead revealed. Thus, let us offer our respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is seen in that uncontaminated transcendental state. Purport. There are two stages of God realization. One is called Sugyanayam, or very easily understood, generally by mental speculation, and the other is called Durjayam, understood only with difficulty. Paramatma realization and Brahma realization are considered Sugyayam, but realization of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is Durgyayam. As described here, one attains the ultimate realization of the personality Godhead when one gives up the activities of the mind, thinking, feeling, and willing, or in other words, when mental speculation stops. This transcendental realization is above susupti, deep sleep. In our gross conditioned stage, we perceive things through the material experience and remembrance, and in the subtle stage, we perceive the world in dreams. The process of vision also involves remembrance and also exists in a subtle form. Above gross experience and dreams is susupti, deep sleep, and when one comes to the complete spiritual platform, transcending deep sleep, he attains trance, Vishuddha Sattva or Vasudev Sattva, in which the personality of Godhead is revealed. अतः श्री कृष्ण नामादि न भवेद् ग्राह्यम इंद्रिये. As long as one is situated in duality on the sensual platform, gross or subtle, the realization of the original personality Godhead is impossible. Sevanamukhe hi jivado swayameva spurti yada. But when one engages his senses in the service of the Lord, specifically when one engages the tongue in the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra and tasting only Krishna Prasada with the spirit of service, the Supreme Personality Goddess is revealed. This is indicated in this verse by the word Suchi Sadmane. Suchi means purified by the spirit of rendering service with one's senses. One's entire existence becomes Suchi Sadma, the platform of uncontaminated purity. Daksha therefore offer his respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality Godhead, who is revealed on the platform of Suchi Sadma. In this regard, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur quotes the following prayer by Lord Brahma from the Srimad Bhagavatam 10.14.6. Tathapi bhuman mahima gunasya te vidbuna arthi amalantara atmabhi. One whose heart has become completely purified, my Lord, can understand the transcendent qualities of your Lordship and can understand the greatness of your activities. Text 27:28. Just as great learned Brahmanas who are expert in performing ritualistic ceremonies and sacrifices can extract the fire dormant within wooden pool by chanting the 15 Samidheni mantras, thus proving the efficacy of the Vedic mantras. So those who are actually advanced in consciousness, in other words, those who are Krishna conscious, can find the super soul, who by his own spiritual potency is situated within the heart. The heart is covered by the three modes of material nature and the nine material elements: material nature, the total material energy, and the ego, the mind, and the five objects of sense gratification, and also by the five material elements and 10 senses. These 27 elements constitute the external energy of the Lord. The great yogis meditate upon the Lord who is situated as the super soul Paramatma within the core of the heart. May that super soul be pleased with me. The super soul is realized when one is eager for liberation from the unlimited varieties of material life. One actually attains the such liberation when he engages in the transcendental loving service of the Lord and realizes the Lord because of his attitude of service. The Lord may be addressed by various spiritual names which are inconceivable to material senses. When will that Supreme Personality of Godhead be pleased with me? Purport. In his commentary to this verse, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur uses the word Durvigyayam, which means very difficult to realize. The pure stage of existence is described in Bhagavad Gita 7.28, wherein Krishna says, Yesham tav antgatam papam jnanam punyam karmanam te dvandva moho nirmukta bhajate mam dridavata. Persons who have acted piously in previous life and in this life, whose sinful actions are completely eradicated and who are freed from the duality of delusion, engage themselves in my service with determination. Elsewhere in Bhagavad Gita 9.14, the Lord says, Satatam kirtayanto mam yantantascha dhrivrata namasyayantascha mam bhaktya nitya yukta upasate. Always chanting my glories, endeavoring with great determination, bowing down before me, these great souls perpetually worship me with devotion. One can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead after transcendenting all material impediments. Therefore, Lord Krishna also says in the Gita 7.3, Manushyanam saheshushu kaschid yatati siddhe yatatvam api siddhanam kaschin mam veti tatpataha. Out of many thousands among men, one may endeavor for perfection, and those who have achieved perfection, hardly one knows me in truth. To understand Krishna, the Supreme Personality Godhead, one must undergo severe penance and austerity. But since the path of devotion service is perfect, by following this process, one can very easily come to the spiritual platform and understand the Lord. This too is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 18.55, wherein Krishna says, Bhaktya mam abhijanati yavan yashasmi tattva tato mam tato gyatva vishase tat anantaram. One can understand the Supreme Personality Godhead as he is only by devotional service. And when one is in full Krishna consciousness of the Supreme Lord, by such devotion he can enter into the kingdom of God. Thus, although the subject matter is Durvigyam, extremely difficult to understand, it becomes easy if one follows the prescribed method. Coming in touch with the Supreme Personality Godhead is possible through pure devotional service, which begins with Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu. In this regard, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur quotes a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam 2.8.5. Pravishtaha karma randhena swaranam bhava suroruham. The process of hearing and chanting enters the core of the heart, and in this way one becomes a pure devotee. By continuing this process, one comes to the stage of transcendental love, and then he appreciates the transcendental name, form, qualities, and the pastime of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other words, a pure devotee by devotional service is able to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead despite many material impediments, which are all various energies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Easily making his way through these impediments, a devotee comes directly in contact with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. After all, the material impediments described in these verses are but various energies of the Lord. When a devotee is eager to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he prays to the Lord. Ainanda tanuja kinkaram patitam mam visme bhavam mudo kripaya tava pad pankaja sita dhuli sadisam vitintaya. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yet somehow or other I have fallen into the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. Being pleased with the devotee, the Lord turns all his material implements into spiritual service. In this connection, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur quotes a verse from the Vishnu Purana. Haladni sandhini samvita tvai eka sarva samastitau halada tapa kari mishra tyagi tvai no guna varjate. In the material world, the spiritual energy of the Supreme Personality Godhead is manifested as tapa kari, which means causing miseries. Everyone hankers for happiness. But although happiness originally comes from the pleasure potential of the Supreme Personality Godhead in the material world, because of material activities, the pleasure potential of the Lord becomes a source of miseries. Halada tapa kari. False happiness in the material world is a source of distress. But when one endeavors for happiness are redirected toward the satisfaction of Supreme Personality of Godhead, this tapakari element of misery is vanquished. An example given in this connection is that extracting fire from wood is certainly difficult, but when the fire comes out, it burns the wood to ashes. In other words, experiencing the Supreme Personality of Godhead is extremely difficult for those devoid of devotional service. But everything becomes easier for a devotee, and thus he can very easily meet the Supreme Lord. Here the prayers say that the form of the Lord is beyond the jurisdiction of material form and is therefore inconceivable. A devotee prays, however, my dear Lord, be pleased with me so that I may very easily be seen your transcendental form and potency. Non-devotees try to understand the Supreme Brahman by discussions of neti, neti, nisheda, nirva, sukamulti. A devotee, however, simply by chanting the holy name of the Lord, avoids such laborious speculations and realizes the existence of the Lord very easily. Text 29. Anything expressed by material vibrations, anything ascertained by material intelligence, and anything experienced by the material senses or concocted within the material mind is but an effect of the modes of material nature, and therefore has nothing to do with the real nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Lord is beyond the creation of this material world, for He is the source of the material qualities and creation. As a cause of all causes, He exists before the creation and after creation. I wish to offer my respectful obeisances unto Him. Purport. One who manufactures names, forms, qualities, or paraphernalia pertaining to the Supreme Personality Godhead cannot understand Him, since He is beyond creation. The Supreme Lord is the creator of everything, and this means that He existed when there was no creation. In other words, His name, form, and qualities are not materially created entities, they are transcendental always. Therefore, by our material concoctions, vibration, and thoughts, we cannot ascertain the Supreme Lord. This is explained in the verse Atha Shri Krishna Namadi Na Bhavet Grahyam Indriye. Prachetas Daksha herein offers prayers to the transcendence, not to anyone within the material creation. Only fools and rascals think God of material creation. This is confirmed by the Lord Himself in Bhagavad Gita 9.11. Avgyananti mam hura manusyam tanum ashritam param bhavam agyananto mam bhutva maheshwaram. Fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature and my supreme dominion over all that be. Therefore, one must receive knowledge from a person to whom the Lord has revealed Himself. There is no value in creating an imaginary name or form for the Lord. Sripad Shankaracharya was an impersonalist, but nevertheless he said, Narayana Paravakta. Narayan, the Supreme Personality Godhead, is not a person of the material world. We cannot assign Narayan a material designation, as the foolish attempt to do when they speak of Daridra Narayan. Poor Narayan. Narayan is always transcendental, beyond this material creation. How can he become Daridra Narayan? Poverty is found within this material world, but in the spiritual world, there is no such thing as poverty. Therefore, the idea of Daridra Narayan is merely a concoction. Daksha very carefully points out that material designation cannot be names of the worshipable Lord. Yad yan niruktam vachasa niruktitam. Nirukta refers to the Vedic dictionary. One cannot properly understand the Supreme Personality Godhead merely by picking up expressions from a dictionary. In praying to the Lord, Daksha does not wish material names and forms to be the objects of his worship. Rather, he wants to worship the Lord, who existed before the creation of material dictionaries and names. As confirmed in the Vedas, Yato Vacho Nirvatante Aprayapya Manasa Saha. The name, form, attributes, and paraphernalia of the Lord cannot be ascertained through a material dictionary. However, if one reaches the transcendental platform um, of understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he becomes well acquainted with everything material and spiritual. This is confirmed in another Vedic mantra, Tam eva viditvati mrityum eti. If one can somehow or other, by the grace of the Lord, understand the transcendental position of the Lord, one becomes eternal. This is further confirmed by the Lord Himself in Bhagavad Gita 4.9. Janma karma cha me divyam evam yo veti tatvata tapta deham punarjanma na eti mameti. So Arjuna, one who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. Simply by understanding the Supreme Lord, one goes beyond birth, death, old age, and disease. Srila Sukdev Goswami therefore advised Maharaj Parikshit in Srimad Bhagavatam 2.1.5 Tasmad Bharata Sarvatma Bhagavan Ishvaro Hari Shotvatya Kirtavasyascha Smartavasya Cheche Hattabhyam. O descendant of King Bharata, one who desires to be free from all miseries must here glorify and also remember the personality of Godhead, who is the super soul, the controller, and the savior from all miseries. Text 30. The Supreme Brahman, Krishna, is the ultimate resting place and source of everything. Everything is done by him, everything belongs to him, and everything is offered to him. His ultimate objective, and whether acting or causing others to act, he is the ultimate doer. There are many causes, high and low. But since he is the cause of all causes, he is well known as the Supreme Brahman, who existed before all activities. He is one without a second, as no other cause. I therefore offer my respects unto him. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna is the original cause as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Aham sarvasya prabhava. Even this material world which is conducted under the modes of material nature is caused by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who therefore also has an intimate relationship with the material world. If the material world were not a part of his body, the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Cause, would be incomplete. Therefore we hear Vasudeva Sarvamniti Sa Mahatma Sudurlabha. If one knows that Vasudeva is the original cause of all causes, he becomes a perfect Mahatma. This Brahma Samhita 5.1 declares Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadi Radir Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam. Krishna, who is known as Govinda, is a supreme controller. He has an eternal blissful spiritual body. He is the origin of all. He has no other origin, for he is the prime cause of all causes. The Supreme Brahman, Tat Brahma, is the cause of all causes, but he has no cause. Anadir Adir Govinda Sarvakaran Karanam. Govinda, Krishna, is the original cause of all causes, but he has no cause for his appearance as Govinda. Govinda expands in multifarious forms, but nevertheless they are one. As confirmed by Madhvacharya, Ananya Sadrashadbhayavayat Eko Rupadi Abhedata. Krishna has no cause nor any equal, and he is one because his various forms as Swamsha and Vibhinamsha are non-different from him. Text 31. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto the all-pervading Supreme Personality of Godhead, who possesses unlimited transcendent qualities, acting from within the course of the hearts of all philosophers who propagate various views. He causes them to forget their own souls, while sometimes agreeing and sometimes disagreeing among themselves. Thus, he creates within this material world a situation in which they are unable to come to a conclusion. I offer my obeisances unto him. Purport. Since time immemorial, or since the creation of the cosmic manifestation, the conditioned souls have formed various parties of philosophical speculation. But this is not true of the devotees. Non-devotees have different ideas of creation, maintenance, and annihilation, and therefore they are called Vadis and Prativadis, proponents and counter proponents. It is understood From the statement of Mahabharata that there are many munis or speculators. Tarko apratishtaha shruyate vibhinna nasava rishiryasya matma nam. A speculator must disagree with other speculators. Otherwise, why should there be so many opposing parties concerned with ascertaining the supreme cause? Philosophically, philosophy means finding the ultimate cause. As Vedanta Sutra very reasonably says, Athato Brahma Jigyasa. Human life is meant for understanding the ultimate cause. Devotees accept that the ultimate cause is Krishna because his conclusion is supported by all Vedic literature and also by Krishna himself, who says, Aham Sarvasya Prabhava, I am the source of everything. Devotees have no problem understanding the ultimate cause of everything, but non devotees must face many opposing elements because everyone who wants to be a prominent philosopher invents his own way. In India, there are many parties of philosophers such as Dvaitwadis, Advaitwadis, Vaisheshikas, Mimamsakas, Mayavadis, and Swabhavavadis, and each of them opposes the others. Similarly, in the Western countries, there are also many philosophers with different views of creation, life, maintenance, and annihilation. Thus, it is undoubtedly a fact that there are countless philosophers throughout the world, each of them contradicting the others. Now, one might ask why there are so many philosophers if the ultimate goal of philosophy is one. Undoubtedly, the ultimate cause is one, the Supreme Brahman. As Arjuna told Krishna in Bhagavad Gita 10.12, Param Brahma, Param Dhama, Pavitram Paramam Bhavan, Purusham Shashvatam Divyam Adi Devam Ajam Vibhum. You are the Supreme Brahman, the ultimate, the supreme abode and purifier, the absolute truth and the eternal divine person. You are the primeval God, transcendental and original, and you are the unborn and all-pervading beauty. Non-devotee speculators, however, do not accept the ultimate cause, Sarva Karana Karanam, because they are ignorant and bewildered concerning the soul and its activities. Even though some of them have a vague idea of the soul, many controversies arise, and the philosophical speculators can never reach a conclusion. All these speculators are envious of the Supreme Personality Godhead. And as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 16.19-20, Tat aham द्विष्टशत कुरुणा संसारेषु नराधमा क्षिपया ज्ञान असुरभाना आसुरीष्व एव योनिषु असुरीं योगिमपापना मूढजनानमि माम अपार्य कुन्तया ततो यन्ति अधमामं गतिम्. Those who are envious and mischievous, who are the lowest among men, are cast by me into the ocean of material existence, into various demoniac species of life. Attaining repeated birth among the species of demoniac life, such persons cannot approach me. Gradually, they sink down to the most abominable type of existence. Because of their envy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, non-devotees are born in demoniac families, life after life. They are great offenders and and because of their offenses, the Supreme Lord keeps them always bewildered. Kurvanti chasham mahur atma moham. The Lord, the Supreme Personality Godhead, purposely keeps them in darkness, atma moham. The great authority, Parashara, the father of Vyasdev, explains the Supreme Personality Godhead thus. Jnana Shakti Baleshwarya Virya Te Shamsi Asheshita Bhagvasya Chadva Vachyani Vinahiryan Gunadabhi. The demoniac speculators cannot understand the transcendental qualities, forms, pastime, strength, knowledge, and the opulence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which are all free from material contamination. Vina Hayer Gunadabhi. These speculators are envious of the existence of the Lord. Jagat Ahur Anishwaram. Their conclusion is that the entire cosmic manifestation has no controller, but is just working naturally. Thus, they are kept in constant darkness, birth after birth, and cannot understand the real cause of all causes. This is the reason why there are so many schools of philosophical speculation. Text 32. There are two parties, namely the theist and the atheist. The theists, who accept the super soul, find a spiritual cause through mystic yoga. The Sankhyaite, however, who merely analyzes the material elements, comes to a conclusion of impersonalism and does not accept a supreme cause, whether Bhagwan, Paramatma, or even Raman. Instead, he is preoccupied with the superfluous external activities of material nature. Ultimately, however, both parties demonstrate the absolute truth because although they offer opposing statements, their object is the same ultimate cause. They are both approaching the same Supreme Brahman to whom I offer my respectful obeisances. Purport. Actually, there are two sides to this argument. Some say that the Absolute has no form, Nirvikara, and others say the Absolute has a form, Sakara. Therefore, the word form is the common factor, although some accept it, asti or uh, astika, whereas others try to negate it, nastik or nasti. Since the devotee considers the word form akara, the common factor for both, he offers his respectful obeisances to the form. Although others may go on arguing about whether whether the Absolute has a form or not. In this verse, the word yoga samkhyayoha is very important. Yoga means bhakti yoga because yogis also accept the existence of the all-pervading super soul and try to see that supreme soul within their hearts. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 12.13.1, Dhayan vansistha tad gatena manasa prasyanti yam yogina. The devotee tries to come directly in touch with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whereas the yogi tries to find a super soul within the heart by meditation. Thus, both directly and indirectly, yoga means bhakti yoga. Sankhya, however, means physical study of the cosmic situation through speculative knowledge. This is generally known as Jnana Shastra. The Sankhya are attached to the impersonal Brahman, but the absolute truth is known by three ways. Brahmeti Parmateti Bhagwaneti Shabjate. The absolute truth is one, but some accept him as the impersonal Brahman, some as a super soul existing everywhere, and some as Bhagwan, the supreme personality of Godhead. The central point is the absolute truth. Although the impersonalists and personalists fight with one another, they focus upon the same Para-Brahman, the absolute truth. In the Yoga Shastra, Krishna is described as follows: Krishnam Prisangam Bharam Ambukshagaram Chaturbhujam Shankha Gadadi Udayudham. Thus, the pleasing appearance of the Supreme Personality Godhead's bodily features, his limbs, and his dress are described. The Sankhya Shastra, however, denies the existence of the Lord's transcendental form. The Sankhya Shastra says that this absolute truth has no hands, no legs, and no name. He Hai Anama Rupa Guna Pani Padam. Akshakshur Astotram Eka Advaitam Api Nam Rupadikam Nasti. The Vedic mantra says Apani Pado Javano Grahita. The Supreme Lord has no legs and hands, but he can accept whatever is offered to him. Actually, such statement accept that the Supreme has hands and legs, but deny that he has material hands and legs. That is why the Absolute is called Aprakrita. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has a Satchidananda Vigraha, a form of eternity, form and knowledge and bliss, not a material form. The Sankhyites or Jnanis deny the material form, and the devotees also know very well that the absolute truth, Bhagavan, has no material form. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadi Radhi Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam. Krishna, who is known as Govinda, is the supreme controller. He has an eternal, blissful spiritual body. He is the origin of all. He has no other origin, for he is the prime cause of all causes. The conception of the Absolute without hands and legs and the conception of the Absolute with hands and legs are apparently contradictory. But they both coincide with the same truth about the Supreme Absolute Person. Therefore, the word Vastunishtayo, which is used herein, indicates that both the yogis and Sankhyas have faith in the reality. but are arguing about it from distinct point of views of material and spiritual identities. Parabrahm or Bhrita is a common point. The Sankhyas and Yogis are both situated in that same Brahman, but they differ because of different angles of vision. The directions given by the Bhakti Shastra point one in perfect direction because the Supreme Personality Godhead says in Bhagavad Gita, Bhaktya Mam Abhijanati. Only by devotional service am I to be known. The Bhaktas know that the Supreme Person has no material form, whereas the Jnani simply deny the material form. One should therefore take shelter of the Bhakti Marga, the path of devotion. Then everything will be clear. Jnana. Shloka number is 32, but we are ending before 6.4.32.
संसार दावानन निढलोका थानाया कारुण्य घनाघनात्वं प्राप्तस्य कल्याण गुणनवस वन्दे गुरो श्री चरणारविन्दं महाप्रभु की तनृत्य गीता वादित्रनाद्या मनसुरसेना रोमाञ्चकम्पा भूतरङ्गभाजो वन्दे गुरो श्री चरणारविन्दं श्रीविग्रहाराधनत्यलाला शृङ्गारतन्मन् निर्मज्जनादो युक्तस्य भक्ता नियुञ्जतोऽपि वन्दे गुरो श्री चरणारविन्दं चतुर्विधा श्री भगवत्प्रसाद स्वादनत्रयेतान् हरिभक्तसङ्गान् कृतेवा तृप्तिं भजत सदेव वन्दे गुरो श्री चरणारविन्दम् श्रीराधिका माधव्योरपारा माधुरलीला गुणरूपनाम्नां प्रतीक्षणा स्वाधनलोलुपस्य वन्दे गुरो श्री चरणारविन्दं निकुञ्जयूनो व्रतिकेलिसेध्यै यायालिभिर्यो तेरपेक्षणीया तत्रातिदाक्षात् अतिवल्लभस्य वन्दे गुरो श्री चरणारविन्दं साक्षात् हरित्वेन समस्तशास्त्रे उत्तस्तथा भावयदेव सद्धि किन्तु प्रभोर्या प्रियैव तस्य वन्दे गुरो श्री चरणारविन्दं यस्य प्रसादा भगवत्प्रसादो यस्य प्रसादा नगति कुतोऽपि धन्यं सुवन्तस्य यस्य त्रिसन्ध्यं वन्दे गुरो श्री चरणारविन्दं वन्दे गुरो श्री चरणारविन्दं वन्दे गुरो श्री चरणारविन्दं
नमस्ते
नमो
नमस्ते नरसिंह साथ में
नमस्ते नरसिंहाय प्रहलाद लाददायिने हिरण्याकर्षितपूर्वक्षरः श्रीलटङ्कानखालाय हितो नरसिंहा भरतो नरसिंहा यतो